I never planned to tell this story. Not because I'm ashamed, though maybe I am, but because it still aches in places I can't see. People look at me today and say, "You're strong, Adam." But strength, I've learned, sometimes comes from breaking so quietly that no one even hears the sound. I was 32 when I thought I had life figured out. I'd been teaching at a community college in New Jersey, business classes, nothing fancy, but enough to build a decent life. My students respected me. My colleagues liked me. And every Friday when I'd drive home in the soft evening rain with the radio humming old songs, I'd think, maybe this is what peace feels like. But peace has a strange way of turning into loneliness. I'd go back to an empty apartment, cook something simple and eat in silence. Sometimes I'd call my mother back home just to hear a familiar voice. She'd always end the call with the same sentence. "Son, it's time you found someone." I'd laugh it off. But the truth was, she was right. Then, one ordinary afternoon, a family friend called. Her name was Aunt Farah, though she wasn't really my aunt, just someone who had known my parents for years. She said, "Adam, there's a girl in our extended family back home. Her name's Nadia. Sweet, educated, comes from a simple family. I think you two would get along." I almost dismissed it. Long-distance introductions rarely go anywhere. But something in Aunt Farah's tone stayed with me, gentle, confident, like she knew something I didn't. That night I looked at Nadia's picture for the first time. It wasn't filtered or staged, just her standing in a small courtyard, sunlight on her face, a shy smile. Something about that picture felt real, not glamorous, not posed, just warm. We started talking, slowly at first, polite conversations about family, about food, about the weather back home. And then, like most stories, one message led to another, and soon she was the last person I spoke to before sleeping. Her voice had this softness, almost like she was afraid to take up too much space. She'd say things like, "You must get tired teaching all day," or, "One day I'll cook for you, but don't expect restaurant food." I'd smile without realizing it. A few months later, I flew home for the holidays. Our families met. Tea was poured. Conversations circled around the usual topics: education, values, responsibilities. Nadia barely spoke, eyes lowered, fingers nervously tracing the rim of her teacup. But when she looked up for a moment, I saw kindness, and I thought, maybe that's all I need. The wedding was simple. A small hall, a handful of relatives, the scent of jasmine, the sound of laughter. I wasn't a rich man, but I wanted everything to feel special for her. When I saw her walking toward me that night, red bridal veil shimmering under the lights, I told myself, "Whew, this is the beginning of everything." Back in the US, life moved quickly. Paperwork, visas, phone calls, waiting. When she finally arrived 6 months later, I remember standing at the airport, heart racing, bouquet trembling in my hands like a teenager on his first date. She wore a beige coat, hair tucked neatly, eyes bright and curious. The first thing she said after stepping out was, "It's colder than I imagined." I laughed and handed her the flowers. "Welcome home," I said. Those first few months were beautiful in the way only new beginnings can be. She'd wake early to make breakfast, burn the toast half the time, then giggle and say, "Maybe American toasters don't like me." We'd go grocery shopping together, arguing over brands neither of us had heard of. She loved walking through the aisles of Target, amazed by how many kinds of cereal existed. I loved watching her marvel at small things. Weekends became our ritual. Road trips, diners, the smell of fresh coffee, the soft hum of the car heater. Sometimes she'd rest her head on my shoulder and whisper, "You made my life so beautiful." And I believed her. But even in beauty, cracks can hide. It started with small things. Her scrolling on her phone late at night, the blue light tracing her face while I pretended to sleep. Videos of people traveling, showing luxury handbags, perfect homes, vacations that look like dreams. She'd sigh softly and say, "Look how lucky they are." I'd tell her, "We're lucky too, Nadia. Just in different ways." She'd nod, but her eyes stayed on the screen. Still, I ignored it. I thought it was harmless. Everyone gets lost online sometimes. I focused on work, my students, the mortgage I was saving for. I wanted to build her a future that looked like safety. One evening, over dinner, she said something that stayed with me. "Adam, don't you ever feel stuck? Like life is passing by and we're still ordinary?" I smiled and said, "Ordinary is underrated," but she didn't smile back. Maybe that was the first sign. After that night, something shifted quietly between us. Nothing dramatic, just a small, invisible distance. She began talking more about the influencers she followed. Women who had designer bags, expensive skincare routines, homes that looked like hotels. She'd scroll endlessly, then show me a picture and say, "Look at this couple, Adam. They travel together every month. Isn't that amazing?" I'd smile and say, "It is. But we can't compare our story to theirs." She'd nod, but her eyes would cloud over, as if she was somewhere else. I started working extra hours, not because we needed the money, but because I wanted to surprise her. Maybe a short trip, maybe a small luxury, something that would make her feel special. I even started looking at houses. There was a beautiful one on the outskirts of town. White porch, a big kitchen, sunlight spilling into the living room. I imagined her laughing there, maybe cooking, maybe humming her favorite song. When I told her about it, her face lit up. "You're serious?" she asked. I said firmly, completely, "It's time we build something that's ours." She hugged me, and for a moment it felt like the early days again. We bought the house 3 months later. I still remember the smell of new paint and fresh wood. She decorated every corner. Plants on the windowsill, pastel cushions, candles that smelled like vanilla and rain. I thought contentedly, "This is happiness." But even then, she spent more and more time on her phone, filming short clips, editing pictures. I'd walk into the living room and see her taking selfies in the perfect light. When I teased her, she'd say, "Relaxed. I'm just keeping memories." Soon she began talking about going back to school. "I've always wanted to study more," she said one morning. I was proud of her ambition. I said, "If that's what makes you happy, do it. I'll support you." We found a program nearby. Business administration. Flexible schedule. I covered her tuition and told her, "Go chase your dreams." But I didn't realize that chasing dreams sometimes means running away from what you already have. University opened new doors for her. New friends, new clothes, a new version of herself. And slowly, she started coming home later than usual. I'd ask, "Everything okay?" She'd smile and say, "Just group study." Maybe it was true, maybe it wasn't. But something in her tone, polite, detached, told me she was already building a world that didn't need me in it. At first, I told myself it was just a phase. Everyone changes a little when they study or meet new people. But soon, her laughter sounded different, lighter, louder, almost rehearsed. She'd sit in the corner of the couch, phone angled just right, filming herself talking about life, motivation, style. When I asked what she was doing, she said, "It's just for fun, Adam. Everyone's doing it." Her followers grew quickly. I'd hear notification sounds every few minutes. She began dressing differently, curling her hair, doing small makeup tutorials before class. Sometimes I'd joke, "You're becoming famous." She'd smile proudly and say, "Maybe one day." I was happy she had confidence, but part of me missed the quiet woman who used to burn toast and laugh about it. The more she gained attention online, the less present she seemed at home. Dinner conversations turned into her scrolling sessions. When I spoke, she'd nod absently, half listening. One weekend, I suggested a short trip. "Let's go somewhere, just us. We haven't done that in a while." She hesitated, then said, "I can't, Adam. I promised to help a friend with a video shoot." Her friend was someone I'd never met. Still, I trusted her. Weeks passed, and she started working part-time in a small marketing agency. I encouraged it, thought maybe real-world experience would ground her. She looked genuinely excited when she told me about her boss. "He's very professional, very creative." I didn't think twice about it. But gradually she began coming home later. Always the same explanation. Deadlines, client meetings, work trips. When I asked if everything was okay, she'd smile faintly and say, "Don't worry so much." Late at night, I'd hear her phone vibrate and see her screen light up. She'd tilt it away, pretending not to notice. I'd roll over and tell myself to stop imagining things. After all, love isn't built on suspicion. Still, a small voice inside me whispered that something was changing. Something I couldn't name yet. I ignored it, convincing myself this was just another test of patience. Because that's what marriage is, right? Patience, understanding, forgiveness. At least that's what I'd always believed. One Friday evening, she walked through the door later than usual. Her perfume lingered long after she passed by me, and her eyes had that sparkle people get when they've just returned from somewhere they enjoyed. I asked, "Rough day at work?" She smiled faintly. "Long meetings," she said, setting her phone face down on the counter. Something about the way she said it didn't sit right, but I didn't ask again. I'd promised myself never to be the husband who snoops, never to turn love into interrogation. That night, while she showered, a message popped on her phone screen. Just a preview, nothing more. A man's name I didn't recognize, followed by, "I miss your laugh already." My chest tightened. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. When she came out, towel in hand, humming softly, I looked at her and almost asked. But she looked tired, happy even. So I swallowed my question and forced a smile. "Dinner's ready," I said. Later, when she fell asleep beside me, I stared at the ceiling for hours. The clock ticked louder than usual. I told myself there must be an explanation. Maybe a coworker joking, maybe an inside reference. Still, that whisper in my mind grew louder. "You already know the truth, Adam." The next morning she was cheerful, as if nothing had happened. She brewed coffee, played her favorite playlist, singing sang under her breath. I wanted to believe her lightness meant everything was fine. But the air between us had changed. Subtle, heavy, full of unspoken things. That day I realized something cruel. Love can survive distance, even silence, but it rarely survives doubt. I didn't confront her, not yet. Part of me hoped I was wrong. Part of me feared I wasn't. And so, I decided to wait, to watch, to listen, and to pray that the woman I loved was still somewhere behind that perfect smile. Because deep down, I already knew. This was no longer the beginning of everything. It was the beginning of the end. The week after that message, I tried to live as if nothing had changed. Routine can be a kind of mercy. I woke up early, ironed my shirts, packed my lunch, and left before sunrise. In class, I spoke about budgets, opportunity cost, how numbers tell the truth we don't want to face. Funny, isn't it? How easy it is to teach clarity, and how hard it is to live it. At home, Nadia moved through mornings like a song she knew by heart. Coffee, a quick mirror check, a photo by the window, soft light, chin tilted, a caption about gratitude. Then she'd rush out with a kiss to the air and a promise to text later. Sometimes she did. Sometimes she didn't. I kept busy with the house. The porch needed ceiling. The guest room needed a shelf. The hallway begged for framed photos. I printed our wedding picture and placed it at the top of the stairs. Every evening I'd stand there, a moment longer than necessary, hoping it would remind us who we were when we began. A month later, life did what life does. It complicated everything and softened it at the same time. Nadia told me she was late. We bought a test, then another, just to be sure. When the second line appeared, she covered her mouth and cried into my chest. I held her and felt something old and solid return. Purpose. Pregnancy made her glow in a way even filters can't fake. She filmed less, slept more, craved small, ordinary things. Warm milk at night, mango slices in the afternoon. I read every article I could find. How to be a good birth partner, what to say during contractions, how to swaddle. I painted the spare room a soft gray. We argued over names and laughed at our stubbornness. On a quiet winter evening, our daughter arrived. Tiny, furious, perfect. The nurse placed her on Nadia's chest, and for a moment the world paused. I whispered, "Welcome," and promised everything I knew how to promise. Those first nights were a blur of warm bottles, half sleep, and the hushed miracle of new breath. I learned to rock a crying baby while marking papers with my free hand. I learned that love is heavier and lighter than anyone tells you. For a while, the doubts faded like fog. We were a team again. Messy, exhausted, grateful. Nadia would send me pictures during the day. Our daughter curled like a comma, her tiny hand gripping a finger. Sunlight on a sleeping face. I kept them all in a folder named Home. But peace is rarely permanent. When the baby settled into a routine, Nadia's restlessness returned. Soft at first. She started posting again. New mom tips. Day in my life. Healthy snacks that actually taste good. Brands noticed. Small packages arrived. Serums, teas, a knitted blanket with our daughter's initials. Nadia smiled wider on camera than at the dinner table. I told myself it was harmless. Everyone needs something of their own, especially new mothers learning their reflection again. But the phone was back at midnight. The blue glow across the sheets, the muted giggles at messages I didn't see. I turned away and counted my breaths. A year later, we had a son. Lightning doesn't strike twice, they say, but blessings sometimes do. Our home filled with tiny socks and louder laughter. I bought a minivan I swore I'd never buy. Sundays became grocery runs and laundry mountains, and nap schedules written on the fridge. I thought, this is the life I prayed for when I was alone. When my mother called, she'd say, "God has been kind to you, Adam. Don't take it for granted. Protect what you've built." I nodded, meaning it. I believed I could hold everything together by working harder, loving quieter, forgiving faster. I didn't know then that love is not a wall you can push against a storm. It's a door you keep choosing to open, and someone on the other side has to keep choosing too. Nadia went back to work 6 months after our son was born. She said she missed being around adults, missed the noise of an office, the feeling of accomplishment. I understood. Parenthood can be beautiful, but it can also shrink your world to the size of a living room. So I said yes. I told her, "Go ahead. You deserve this." Her company specialized in digital marketing, exactly the kind of field she'd always admired. She came home with stories about campaigns, deadlines, clients. There was one name that started appearing more often. Daniel, her boss. She'd mention him casually, laughing about his strange coffee order or the way he talked too fast during meetings. I didn't think much of it. She started dressing differently. Nothing drastic, just more attention to detail. Perfume I hadn't bought her. A new handbag that appeared without a receipt. When I asked, she said, "Brand gift, part of a collaboration." Her smile was rehearsed, practiced, and I wanted so badly to believe it was real. One evening, as she scrolled through her phone, I asked, "Do you ever feel like we're drifting apart?" She looked up for a second, then shrugged. "Adam, don't be dramatic. Every couple feels that way sometimes." Her tone was light, but her eyes stayed cold. After that, I stopped asking questions. Not because I didn't care, but because I didn't want to hear answers that would change everything. Instead, I tried harder. I started cooking dinner before she got home, planned weekends around her schedule, learned how to manage 2 kids' chaos on my own. She noticed, but only in passing. "You're such a good dad," she'd say, and kiss my cheek before returning to her messages. One night, when she thought I was asleep, I heard her whispering. Soft, hushed, the kind you only give someone who makes your heart race. I turned slightly and caught the faintest reflection of her phone screen. A man's face. She smiled at something he said, the way she used to smile at me. I didn't say a word. I closed my eyes, pretending to sleep, and felt something inside me fall quiet. It wasn't anger. It was grief. The kind of grief that comes when you realize the person you'd do anything for is already half gone. The next morning, I brewed coffee like nothing had happened. She hummed while buttering toast, phone buzzing beside her plate. When I looked at her, she smiled that same easy smile. "Big day today," she said, slinging her bag over her shoulder. I nodded and said, "Yeah, for both of us." She didn't notice the meaning behind my words, or maybe she did and just didn't care. I started noticing the small lies first. The perfume that lingered longer than usual, the late replies, the sudden interest in business trips. She'd say, "It's part of a client project, just 2 days." And I'd nod like a fool rehearsing trust. When she returned, there'd be pictures of city skylines and hotel breakfasts, but none of her colleagues. Still, she'd talk about meetings and presentations, never missing a beat. I told myself that maybe I was overthinking. Marriage isn't a straight line. It bends, it breaks, it heals. So I kept giving her the benefit of the doubt. Because when you love someone, denial feels easier than confrontation. One evening, while folding laundry, I found a hotel receipt tucked inside her jacket pocket. Different city, weekend date, double occupancy. I stared at it for a long time, heartbeat drumming in my ears. My first instinct was to storm into the living room, hold it up, demand an explanation. But something stopped me. Maybe pride. Maybe fear. That night, I waited for her to come home. When she did, I watched her from across the table. Hair styled perfectly, eyes bright, stories ready. I asked gently, "How was the trip?" She smiled without hesitation. "Exhausting. You know how work gets." Her calmness scared me more than any confession could have. After she went to bed, I sat alone on the couch. Our wedding photo hung above the TV. For the first time, I couldn't look at it. All I could see was the receipt on the table beside me, a silent witness to everything I didn't want to admit. The next morning, she noticed I was quiet. "Are you okay?" she asked. "I'm fine," I said, forcing a smile. She leaned in, kissed my cheek, and said, "Don't overthink everything, Adam. You always do that." Then she left, heels clicking, perfume trailing, door closing behind her like punctuation at the end of a sentence I didn't write. Days turned into weeks. We spoke less. She spent more nights working late. The kids asked where she was, and I'd lie. Mommy's busy helping people. I hated the sound of my own voice when I said it. Sometimes, in the quiet after bedtime, I'd scroll through old pictures of us. Vacations, birthdays, small moments that once felt permanent. Now, they look like scenes from someone else's life. And, in a way, they were. There's a strange kind of loneliness that comes from living with someone who's already left you in their heart. You still share a roof, a meal, a bed, but the space between you feels wider than oceans. I kept waiting for her to come back, not physically, but emotionally. But every day she drifted further away, smiling into a world that no longer included me. The day after finding that receipt, I couldn't concentrate on anything. Every number on the attendance sheet blurred into the same date printed on that paper. When my students asked questions, I answered automatically, pretending to be the man I used to be. At home, the evidence sat folded inside my wallet, a secret heavier than any truth. I kept telling myself there had to be an explanation. Maybe she'd booked the room for a colleague. Maybe the company made an error. But deep down, I already knew better. That evening, Nadia came home. She kissed our daughter, ruffled our son's hair, and asked what was for dinner. Her normalcy hurt more than anger ever could. How easily she moved through the lie, as if it were another room in our house. Later, when the kids were asleep, I said quietly, "You've been traveling a lot lately." She smiled without looking up from her phone. "It's work, Adam. You know how marketing is." I stared at her and asked, "And Daniel, does he travel with you?" The pause that followed lasted seconds, but it felt like hours. Then she said, "Of course he does. He's my boss." I nodded, pretending the answer satisfied me. She turned away, scrolling again, and I realized the conversation was over before it even began. For the next few weeks, I tried to be normal. I played with the kids, graded papers, fixed the leaky faucet. But the silence between us grew thicker. Some nights, she'd fall asleep facing the wall, and I'd lie there, watching the shadow of her phone charging on the nightstand, a cold blue pulse in the dark. Every night after everyone slept, I'd write the same sentence. Maybe tomorrow she'll come back. Then came another trip. 3 days, she said. This time I didn't ask where. I simply helped her pack, folded her clothes, zipped her suitcase, and smiled through it all. When she left, our daughter ran after her shouting, "Bring me a toy!" Nadia waved from the car, her hand sparkling with the same ring I'd once placed there with trembling hope. That night the house felt too quiet. I wandered through rooms she'd decorated. The candles, the cushions, the framed quotes about happiness. And every object looked like a performance frozen mid-scene. Somewhere around midnight I sat on the couch and whispered to no one, "What did I do wrong?" The question echoed in the empty room, unanswered, unwanted, and finally unbearable. On the second night of her trip, a fraud alert pinged my phone. It wasn't fraud, just the bank doing what banks do when spending patterns change. 2 charges from the same hotel restaurant, an hour apart, flagged as unusual. I stared at the screen until the notification dimmed, then brightened again, as if asking me to choose, see it or don't. I put the phone face down and sat in the dark. She returned the next afternoon with a suitcase that smelled like expensive soap and lobby air. The kids ran to her. She handed them gifts, small plush toys with city names stitched across their bellies. To me, she gave a neatly folded t-shirt. "Thought of you," she said, eyes already darting to a message lighting up her screen. The evening, while she showered, I noticed the suitcase zipper had caught a strand of hair that wasn't hers. Too long, too light. I freed it with shaking hands and told myself I was losing my mind. When she came out, steam following, she tossed a hotel keycard into the trash and said, "They demagnetized these anyway." I nodded like a man who didn't know what that meant. The days after that felt like living inside a paused video. Everything looked normal, sounded normal, moved in the shape of normal until you listened closely. Her laughter grew careful around me. My questions turned into statements about the weather. We became two actors delivering lines from separate scripts. One Saturday, we took the kids to the park. A neighbor waved from a bench and said, "Business trips again, huh? Must be exciting." Nadia laughed. "It's all airports and headaches." Her phone buzzed and she stepped away to answer. Our daughter tugged my sleeve. "Daddy, when is Mommy going to stay home?" I swallowed and said, "Soon." It was the first real lie I ever told my child. That night, after the kids slept, I tried. I said, "Nadia, we're not okay. I can feel it." She stared at the TV and kept her voice steady. "You're overthinking. You always do this." I leaned forward, "Then tell me the truth." She blinked once, slowly, like someone deciding which door to walk through. "We're fine," she said, and turned up the volume. Something in me gave way. Not a break, not yet. Just a quiet surrender. I stopped searching her face for the woman I married. I started looking for the father I needed to be, with or without her attention. I made school lunches, packed spare outfits, learned the schedules by heart. I became a map the kids could read even when the weather changed. A week later, she announced another strategy offsite. 3 days. I helped her fold dresses she never wore at home, slipped a note into her toiletries bag that said, "Come back to us." When I hugged her goodbye, I felt the distance like a cool draft between two open windows. That evening, after the dishes and the bedtime stories, I sat on the couch and opened my laptop. If love was a door you chose each day, I needed to know whether she was still standing on the other side. I didn't check her phone. I didn't follow her. I opened our shared credit card portal and scrolled to the most recent reservation. Attached was a view invoice link I'd never noticed before. I clicked, and there it was. Room type, dates, charges, and a small, indifferent line near the bottom that said, 2 guests, breakfast included. I closed the laptop carefully, exhaled sharply, like it might shatter if I breathed too hard. The house was silent, soft, ordinary. A toy car under the coffee table, a blanket slumped over the arm of the couch. The kind of life people spend years praying for. I sat there a long time, hands folded, listening to the refrigerator hum. The world outside kept moving. unaware that something inside me had stopped. That night, for the first time, I didn't pray for her to come back. I just prayed for the strength to face whatever truth was waiting. After that invoice, I moved through the house like a guest who had overstayed. I kept my voice gentle for the kids, showed up at work, paid bills on time. Outside, I looked fine. Inside, I was measuring every silence. That's when Nadia said her parents wanted to visit, just for a few months. I said yes, immediately. Maybe family would steady us. 2 weeks later, they arrived with 2 heavy suitcases and tired smiles. Her mother hugged me warmly. Her father shook my hand with both of his, grateful and proud. Her youngest sister came too, nervous but excited to see America. The house felt different in a good way at first. Her mother cooked fragrant meals that reminded me of home. Her father fixed a squeaky door and insisted on paying for small groceries. In the evenings, we sat around the table while the kids climbed into laps and asked for stories of back home. I breathed easier. Maybe this could still be saved. But small shifts began. When I suggested we all eat together, Nadia would say she'd already eaten. Her mother would glance at her, then at me, and change the subject. Her sister filmed little clips for social media, family dinners, grandparents visiting, cropped so I wasn't in frame. It wasn't cruel, just careless. One night I overheard Nadia speaking quietly to her mother in the kitchen. I wasn't trying to listen, but some words travel on their own. "He's become controlling," she said. "He checks on me too much. He doesn't understand my work." I stood perfectly still in the hallway, holding a basket of laundry like a shield. Controlling. The word felt like a stain thrown at a white shirt. Later, her mother spoke to me gently. "Adam, you work very hard, but don't stress her. She is trying to build something." I nodded and said nothing. I tried to be more patient. I did school drop-offs, late-night dishes, weekend errands. Her father insisted on mowing the lawn. I thanked him and brought cold water to the porch. He said, "You are a good man." I smiled, but the praise landed empty. Soon short visits turned into plans, apartment listings, talk of staying longer. "Just for stability," Nadia said. "I want them close. It will help with the kids." I agreed because I wanted to be the man who doesn't make life harder. I didn't see yet how easy it is to lose your place in your own home when every decision is made over your shoulder. One evening, her sister showed Nadia a new handbag online. "Maybe when your next brand pays," Nadia said, half joking. They laughed. I washed the pans and stared at the window until my reflection blurred. Somewhere between kindness and caution, I had stopped being her partner and become the background of her life. That night, I lay awake and counted my breaths again. I told myself, families can heal a marriage, but families can also choose a side before the first question is asked. Weeks turned into months after her family arrived. Their stay quietly became permanent. Mail started coming in their names. New shoes lined the hallway, and her father talked about applying for local jobs. I didn't object. It felt cruel to chase away people who called me son. But small shifts deepened. Her mother handled the kids' schedules, Her father paid bills to help out, and every decision went through Nadia first. I became the last to know what was happening in my own house. One evening, I overheard Nadia laughing with her sister. "She thinks I'm wasting my talent here," Nadia said. "Daniel says I should start my own agency one day." Daniel again. The name that now sat between us like a shadow. Her sister replied, "You could if you didn't have so many responsibilities." They both went quiet when I entered. Later that night, I said, "You don't seem happy lately." She sighs. "You wouldn't understand, Adam. You're content being ordinary. Ordinary." That word hit harder than any insult. Soon her parents began hinting that maybe the house should be in her name. "For security," her father said. "It's just paperwork." I smiled and said I'd think about it. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I found her mother watering plants outside. She said, "A woman needs something of her own. It makes her strong." I nodded, pretending to agree, though a quiet voice inside whispered that strength built on someone else's kindness isn't strength at all. By winter, her parents spoke of our home, naturally, without hesitation. I was still there, paying, fixing, smiling, but invisible in every sentence. Love had turned into duty. Family had become audience. And somewhere between gratitude and guilt, I realized I was living in a house that no longer felt like mine. By spring, I started keeping longer hours at work. It wasn't ambition, it was escape. The quiet of an empty classroom felt kinder than the tension waiting at home. When I returned, the lights were often low, her parents watching TV, the kids already asleep. Nadia sat with her laptop, earbuds in, nodding to music I couldn't hear. If I asked about her day, she'd answer without looking up. "Fine." "Busy." That was our new language. Short words, safe distances. One night, after dinner, her father handed me a document. "It's just a refinance," he said. "A lower rate. You'll save money." My name was still there, but hers now came first. He spoke kindly, as if helping, yet his tone left no space for refusal. I signed. Not because I trusted him, but because I didn't want a scene in front of the kids. A week later, Nadia came home late again. When she walked in, the smell of expensive cologne lingered behind her. I asked quietly, "Were you with Daniel?" She froze for half a second, long enough to answer without words, then smiled. "Stop acting paranoid, Adam. You're embarrassing yourself." Her mother looked up from the couch and said gently, "Don't fight. She's tired." And that was it. Another conversation swallowed before it began. That night, I stepped outside. The air was cold, the street empty except for the sound of sprinklers turning in someone else's yard. I realized I had built a life that didn't belong to me anymore. A house, a family, even peace. None of it felt like mine. When I came back in, Nadia was scrolling through her phone, the glow lighting her face. Without looking up, she said, "Don't stay up too late." It was ordinary, almost tender. But in that moment, I knew tenderness without love is just habit. Summer came, but the warmth never reached our house. The kids ran through sprinklers in the yard while I grilled dinner for a family that no longer spoke to me. Her parents discussed property taxes as if I weren't there. Her sister filmed it all, captioned, "Family Evenings." When I watched the clip later, I noticed I wasn't in a single frame. One Sunday, Nadia told me she needed to travel again. "Just 3 days," she said, packing with practiced calm. Her parents exchanged looks that said more than words. I didn't argue. By then, silence had become my defense. That night, her father sat beside me on the porch. "You're a good man, Adam," he said. "But sometimes, a woman needs more than what comfort can buy." He meant it kindly, which made it worse. I nodded and stared at the yard lights flickering against the fence. When she returned, her tone had changed. Distant, colder, almost rehearsed. Every word sounded like a legal statement. She started keeping financial papers in a locked drawer. Phone always face down. Passwords changed. And still, I said nothing. Then, one evening, I found her in the kitchen with her mother. They stopped talking when I entered. A single folder sat open on the table. Loan statements, mortgage documents. Her name highlighted. When our eyes met, she said quietly, "It's just for protection." I asked, "From what?" She didn't answer. Her mother, "You men never understand until it's too late." That night, I walked the hallway after everyone slept. The children's room smelled of safety, powder, lotion, dreams. I stood by their doors, whispering goodnight to something I could already feel slipping away. Downstairs, the living room glowed faintly from her phone left charging. A message preview lit up for a second. "Can't wait to see you again. Daniel." I sat on the couch until dawn. Not crying, not angry, just still. There's a moment when love doesn't break. It dissolves. That was mine. A few weeks later, I came home to find the house unusually quiet. The kids were at school, her parents out shopping. Only Nadia sat at the dining table, laptop open, eyes cold. When she spoke, her voice was calm. Too calm. "Adam, I think we need space." I thought I'd misheard her. She didn't look angry, only distant, as if she'd already moved out, emotionally. "Space?" I asked. "For what?" She folded her arms. "You've been watching me, questioning me. I can't live under this pressure anymore." Pressure. That's what she called it. The way I asked where she went, or why she came home late. I wanted to tell her I was only trying to save us. Instead, I said nothing. Her parents stood with her that evening when I came downstairs. Her father's expression was sad, her mother's firm. "She needs time," her mother said. "You both do." Nadia avoided my eyes. "I'm going to stay with a friend for a few days," she said. "The kids will be fine here." I nodded. If space was what she wanted, maybe silence would bring her back. But silence has a way of inviting its own company. 2 days later, a police officer knocked at the door. "Mr. Adam Khan?" he asked. When I said yes, he handed me an envelope. A temporary restraining order, filed by Nadia. The words blurred as I read them: emotional neglect, verbal intimidation, controlling behavior. I stood there on the porch, the world spinning slower than my heartbeat. Inside the house, her parents whispered in another room. Her mother's voice, soft but clear, said, "It's better this way." The officer asked if I needed to collect belongings. I packed a small bag, just enough for a few days, and looked around the home I'd built. The walls, the frames, even the air felt like it belonged to someone else. When I left, my daughter's drawing fluttered off the fridge, a crayon family of 4 holding hands. I picked it up, folded it carefully, and slipped it into my pocket. That night, I checked into a cheap motel on the edge of town. For the first time in years, the silence felt like mercy. The motel room smelled of detergent and loneliness. I lay on the stiff bed, staring at the ceiling, the hum of the air conditioner louder than my thoughts. Outside, a neon sign flickered. Vacancy. I wondered if that word had always been waiting for me. 2 days passed before I heard from anyone. Then came an email from Nadia's lawyer, short, precise, almost polite. Please refrain from contact until further notice. Our client wishes to proceed peacefully. Peacefully. The word made me laugh, but no sound came out. At work, I avoided questions. My colleagues thought I'd taken time off for family matters. In a way, I had. Every night after class, I drove past the house just to see the lights. Once I saw my son's shadow against the curtain, jumping on the couch. It broke me and held me together all at once. A week later, a friend called. He sounded uneasy. "Adam, I saw something online. Maybe you shouldn't look, but you will anyway." I did. Nadia had posted a long caption beneath a photo of herself and the kids, smiling in the park. It read, "Sometimes you have to protect your peace, even if people call it selfish. Healing starts with courage." Thousands of likes, hundreds of comments. People called her brave. I scrolled until the screen blurred. Her parents stayed silent, but her sister posted stories of new beginnings and family support. My name wasn't mentioned, but it didn't need to be. Everyone could fill in the blanks. One night, I got a call from a blocked number. A man's voice said, "You should stop showing up near her house. It's not helping your case." Then he hung up. Daniel, I thought. Of course. I stopped driving past after that. Instead, I wrote letters I'd never send, one for each of them. To my daughter, I wrote, "I'm still here." To my son, "One day you'll understand." To Nadia, I wrote nothing. There were no words left that she would have believed. Weeks blurred into months. My lawyer told me not to worry, that the case looked weak, that I'd be cleared soon. But innocence doesn't cancel pain. It just teaches you how quiet survival can be. 3 months passed before the hearing. By then, I'd grown used to the sound of nothing. No laughter, no footsteps, no voice calling my name. I rented a small apartment near campus, barely furnished but clean. Each night I'd open the window and listen to the city breathe. Sometimes silence feels less lonely when it belongs to everyone. My lawyer called the morning of the hearing. "She'll have to appear in person," he said. "She's claiming neglect and intimidation." "But there's no evidence, Adam. Just words. Words." She'd always been good with those. In court, she arrived looking flawless. Her parents sat behind her, calm, rehearsed. Daniel wasn't there. I noticed that instantly. She avoided my eyes as she took the stand. Her statement was polished. He isolated me, controlled the finances, questioned my work. The judge listened without reaction. When it was my turn, I spoke simply. I never raised my voice. I built that house. Every payment, every wall, every choice was for her and our children. I showed the messages, the ones where she'd thanked me, where she'd said, "You're the best thing that ever happened to me." For a moment, something flickered in her expression. Not guilt, fear, because the truth wasn't breaking me fast enough. The order was lifted that day, though temporary custody stayed with her. Outside the courthouse, she walked past without looking up. But her father stopped me. "She's made mistakes," he said. "She'll see that soon." I nodded, unsure whether to believe him. A week later, I got a call from a colleague. "Adam, have you seen the news?" Daniel's company had been sued for harassment, multiple complaints, one filed by a woman from another branch. Nadia's name wasn't there, but the timeline was: trips, conferences, client visits, the same dates I'd marked in my journal months ago. That night, I sat in my apartment, the glow of the laptop painting the room pale blue. For the first time in a long time, I didn't cry. I just whispered to the quiet. Truth doesn't need a stage. It just waits. News travels faster than guilt. Within a week, whispers reached her office. People stopped tagging her in posts. Brands that once begged for her attention quietly moved on. Her followers noticed too. Less glamour, fewer smiles. Comments asking, "Are you okay?" She went silent online for a month. Then one afternoon my phone buzzed. An unknown number. A voice I hadn't heard in months. "Adam." "It's me." I didn't hang up. She spoke fast, words trembling. "Can we talk? Please, it's not what you think. Everything's falling apart." I took a breath and said, "It's exactly what I think." Then I ended the call. That night, my lawyer confirmed what I already knew. Her complaint was withdrawn. No apology, no statement, just gone. The house, however, remained hers. Legal system or not, she'd won that part of the story. I drove past the old neighborhood once. Lights on, curtains drawn, her parents still there, the same car in the driveway. But outside, the air felt heavier, like happiness had moved out. Weeks later, a mutual friend told me Daniel had resigned. The company wanted silence, not scandal. He'd gone back to his wife, pretending the chaos never happened. And Nadia? She was left with a mortgage, 2 kids, and a reputation that couldn't be filtered. I didn't feel joy, only relief. Not because she was suffering, but because the truth had finally spoken for itself. Some nights, I still heard my children's laughter in my mind and wondered if they missed me. But then I remembered. Love given honestly never disappears. It waits quietly in their memories until they're old enough to see the truth on their own. One evening, I opened the folded drawing I'd kept in my wallet. The crayon family of 4 holding hands. The paper was worn, colors faded, but the lines still connected. I traced them with my thumb and whispered, "We're still a family." just drawn differently now. Outside, the city lights flickered against the window. For the first time in months, I slept without dreams. After months in that small rented room near campus, I found a new apartment across town. It wasn't big, but it was mine. Wide windows, white walls, a bit of sunlight that warmed the floor in the mornings. A place that didn't hold any echoes. I bought a table, 2 chairs, a kettle that clicked softly when it finished, and a secondhand couch that sagged just enough to be honest. My mornings became quiet rituals. Coffee, a walk before class, the same playlist I used to drive home to years ago. I graded papers at the kitchen table and wrote in a notebook at night. Short sentences, no drama. I taught, I called, I slept. Some days that was all I could do without breaking. The court allowed me scheduled visitation, weekends, a few holidays. I built those weekends like small islands in a noisy sea. I kept crayons, an old board game, 2 toothbrushes, a blanket the color of thunderclouds. When the kids arrived, we made pancakes shaped like letters, watched old Pixar movies, timed how fast the elevator could go from the lobby to the 4th floor. When they left, I folded everything carefully, as if it could keep their laughter warm for next time. I didn't talk about Nadia with them. Children know more than we think, and less than they should. When my daughter asked, "Why don't you live with us anymore?" I said, "Because grown-ups are learning how to be kinder. It takes practice." She nodded like she understood and drew a sun in the corner of her paper. My son fell asleep on my chest, the way babies do when the world is still simple. I counted his breaths like a prayer. At work, I started saying yes to overtime and weekend workshops. Not to forget, but to rebuild. After class, younger teachers often asked for advice, and I realized my voice had become steady again. One afternoon, I caught myself laughing in the hallway, and for once, I didn't feel guilty about it. News about Nadia reached me like changing weather. Her brand deals had gone quiet, a new video failed to land, and people whispered that Daniel had gone back to his wife for good. Her parents still kept the house running, but even the most loyal walls eventually give up when love runs out. Mortgages, after all, do not care about pretty captions. One evening, my lawyer called and said, "The custody review is in 3 months. Keep everything documented. Stay calm." I had learned how. Calm isn't the absence of pain. It's the decision not to hand your pain a microphone. That night, I sat by the window and watched the city light up one window at a time. People making dinner, arguing softly, laughing at bad TV. Ordinary lives. For the first time in a long time, ordinary didn't feel small. It felt like shelter. I closed my notebook and wrote one line. If love is a door, I'm learning how to build a house around it, even if I'm the only one who stays. Winter arrived quietly. Snow softened the noise of the city and gave everything a kind of mercy. I walked to work with my collar turned up, breath hanging in the air like a prayer I didn't have to say out loud. The custody decision came in late December. The judge spoke carefully, reading from papers that decided more than they sounded. Joint custody granted. Children to spend equal time with both parents. Simple words, but they opened a world. When the kids arrived that first weekend, they ran into my apartment as if they had never left. We cooked pancakes again, built blanket forts, and stayed up past bedtime watching cartoons. At night, my daughter whispered, "This feels like home too." I didn't correct her. She was right. Nadia didn't call that weekend. She sent a short message. "I'm glad they're happy." It was the first time her words didn't sting. Maybe she meant it. Maybe she didn't. But it didn't matter anymore. By spring, I had started writing again. Nothing dramatic, just short essays about honesty, patience, and what love looks like after the noise fades. A friend convinced me to post one online, then another. People began to read, to comment, to thank me for saying things they couldn't find the words for. It wasn't fame. It was connection. And after everything that had broken, connection felt holy. Sometimes I still thought of her, not with anger, but with distance. She had chased an illusion until it disappeared, leaving her alone in the house she'd fought so hard to win. I had lost almost everything, but found myself again. That night, as the city lights blinked through the window, I whispered a quiet truth I finally believed. Peace isn't the end of pain. It's learning to live without needing revenge. Spring came early that year. The air felt lighter, as if the city itself had decided to forgive me for staying sad too long. I planted small herbs on the balcony, mint, basil, a stubborn little rosemary that refused to die. Every morning I watered them, and in a way, they watered me back. My writing kept growing quietly. Readers began sending messages, stories of divorce, betrayal, starting over. They didn't see me as a victim. They saw me as proof that broken doesn't mean finished. That made me smile. One afternoon, after a lecture, a colleague stopped me by the gate. Her name was Lena, new in the department, soft-spoken, eyes that listened before she spoke. She said, "Your latest post made me cry at my desk." I laughed awkwardly, not sure what to say. Then she added, "Not because it was sad, because it was true." We started having coffee after classes. No rush, no stories to impress each other. Just two people who'd both learned what it cost to stay when you should have left. Her calmness matched mine in a way that didn't feel forced. Sometimes silence between us felt like conversation. The first time she came to my apartment, she looked around and said, "It's peaceful here." I told her it used to be quiet, but peace was new. She smiled. That's the better kind. The kids liked her instantly. She never tried to fill space that wasn't hers, just brought small things, like cupcakes after school or storybooks from her travels. One evening, while reading to my daughter, she fell asleep mid-sentence. Lena looked up and whispered, "You built a good home." I didn't say anything, but my chest felt full for the first time in years. That night, after they left, I sat by the window again. Outside, the same city lights blinked, but they looked different now. Softer, closer. almost kind. Maybe that's what healing really is. Not forgetting the storm, but learning to live with the sound of rain and not fear it anymore. That night, before turning off the lights, I wrote one last line in my notebook. Sometimes, life doesn't give you closure. It gives you clarity. And maybe that's enough. Because love, loss, forgiveness, they all live quietly inside ordinary people. People like you. People like me. Does this story resonate with you? Have you ever held on too long or learned to let go too late? Tell me what you would have done if you were in Adam's place. And if you like stories about ordinary people, real emotions, and second chances, make sure to follow for more. Because sometimes, the most powerful stories are the ones that could be yours.